Okay, should be recording now, and I'll post this. I'll email it to you all later today as well. All right, so let's continue on with appendicular. All right, there we go. All right, so appendicular, we're going to be talking about the limbs, so the arms and the legs, as well as the pelvic and pectoral girdles. So you may be asking yourself here, what is a girdle? Well, a girdle is defined as a confining structure or a structure that supports. Okay, so here we're talking about pectoral girdle. If we can see that here, maybe I'll turn on my little pen here. Here's our pectoral girdle. We're talking about appendicular skeleton here. We've completed axial. And that's made up of the clavicle, right? So your collarbone, and then the scapula. Okay? So they're going to support your upper limbs, these pectoral girdles. Whereas we then have the pelvic girdle, which are the os coxa, the hip bones, and they're going to support the lower limbs, the legs. Take care. All right. So I can give you a quick view of that. So here we can see the girdle, and we have that supports the upper limbs and the lower limbs, right? So pectoral and pelvic girdles. I guess another way to define your girdles is they have sockets. Your girdles are going to have sockets which hold your limbs. So socket for your humerus, and then socket for your femur for the lower limbs. All right, so here we have an anterior and posterior view of the pectoral girdle and the upper limb as well. Those are going to be important again, front and back, anterior versus posterior, but this can be kind of tricky when we're talking about the limbs. So did I go over anatomical position last time? Did I talk about that? I don't remember. Well, anyway, quick review. So this will be anatomical position. So standing, hands to the side. Oh, I'm wearing sweatpants. That looks great. I didn't think I'd be standing up. Yeah, so thumbs pointed outward, laterally, pinkies, medial. Palms out. So that's your anatomical position. And give you that, you gotta get this guy right here. So palms open, thumbs pointing laterally, right? Because this is medial, this is lateral. Okay, so we'll start with the scapula. Okay, so here we have a scapula, so part of your pectoral girdle. And right and left is going to be critical for your scapula. It can be a little tricky. And usually I walk around the class and I'll have people try to put, they'll grab one of the model scapulas and I'll have them put it on their neighbor's back where they think it would go. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to do this. They're going to place them on there so they kind of look like little angel wings or something, right? And that's actually not the case. They're going to go on there like that, okay? So we can see, all right? So they're not going to be oriented like wings, and that's because we have this outer area out here where the humerus is going to insert to support the arm. I didn't mean to draw that area, but there's a great arm. Okay, so that's your orientation that we're looking for there, and right and left. And I'll give you a few more tricks for differentiating right and left as well. But just remember, it shouldn't look like a wing. So we know right and left now, but how do we determine anterior versus posterior? Well, thankfully, it has this long, prominent spine along the posterior side, okay? And the spine has to point backwards. If it was pointing forwards, right, that would be sticking right into your limbs. So this spine, you can see it right here on this anterior view of the skeleton, is going to point backwards. So now you know right and left from anterior, posterior, and then which side of the body. You also see there are some fossa associated with the scapula here. There's 3 of them you actually got to know. So if we use some of our anatomical vocab, first one we'll look at is the supraspinosus fossa. So remember that a fossa is a shallow depression, and then we can just break down this word, right? Supra, meaning above, spinous, because here we have the spine, and then a shallow depression. So we have the above spine shallow depression. Similarly, I can't say that word, then we have the infraspinous fossa. Infra meaning below, and below the spine. So we get a shallow depression below the spine as well. Remember, that's on this posterior side of the scapula. On the anterior side, we have one large fossa called the subscapular fossa. Break down that word, sub meaning below, and then scapular referring to the scapula, or what we call the collarbone, oftentimes. Let's point out some of these processes here. So the first one I'm going to point out here is this coracoid process. Remember, this is an anterior view, so this is going to be kind of poking anteriorly. And key with this one, we're going to see a lot of different processes today, which kind of look all the same, coracoid, coronoid. This one has a C in it, coracoid, and think of scapula when you hear that. So scapula has a C. Not the best thing, but it helps with these. So coracoid process. With the coracoid process, this is an attachment point for some different muscles. So it kind of projects anteriorly, muscles attach. And then above that, we have the acromion. Okay, so this is a large process here, acromion. And this actually articulates with the clavicles or those collarbones. So you can't quite see it here because it's too small, but I think I got a better image coming up. Yeah. Okay, it's reverting. Anyway, so here we'd have much muscle attachment here with this coracoid. And then we have the acromion here, which is going to articulate with the clavicle. Okay, so we can see that those two different processes here. Another thing that's going to be helpful when determining right or left may be the glenoid cavity. Okay, so that is going to be right here. And I'm thinking the best thing to do might be actually just to show you. Because remember, you're going to have all these complete anatomy views as well. Those hyperlinks within there that you can access at any time to help. There we go. So we have this glenoid fossa here, and this is where your humerus is going to insert, okay? The upper arm, upper limb. Okay. The head of the humerus is going to insert there. All right, let's move on to another part of the pectoral girdle here, the clavicle, or your collarbone. Again, right and left is going to be important. It's a little tricky with these because they look really similar, right? So the first thing we're going to want to do is differentiate the two different ends of the clavicle. Get my pen back. I should mention I have a bit of a cold, so I'm hanging in there, but my little one woke me up this morning at 4:30 vomiting in our bed. So he was actually just sitting on my feet here up until a few minutes ago when I kicked him out. He stayed home sick today because he can't stop vomiting. So I hope that's not in my future. All right, so the different ends here. We have an acromial end and a sternal end. So the acromial end is going to interact with, you guessed it, the acromion, that projection of the scapula. Okay, so it's going to articulate there. And I can't remember if I have a image of that or not. I don't. But so here's your acromion here, and then this would be that acromial end of the clavicle that articulates here. Okay. Now the other thing, so you're going to have a sternal end as well, which is going to articulate, or I guess it's not articulating, but that'll interact with the manubrium of the sternum, so that upper portion of the sternum. The other thing that's going to help when you look at these bones, especially in complete anatomy, which I'll show you in a second, is there is a flat, the acromial end is flat. So it's really thin versus the sternal end, which is really round. And you can see that better here in this image I've put. So you get a flat end and a round end. If it's flat, it's the acromial end. If it's round, it's the sternal end going up to the manubrium. Okay. There's your xiphoid process. Terrible sketch. What else? So now you know kind of which end goes where, but then you need to differentiate top from bottom. And we do that, at least the landmark that I look for is this costal tuberosity. So remember, a tuberosity is just kind of a projection a little bit, or a bump. Remember it as a bump. And costal, if you remember, a costa is a rib. So this is your costal tuberosity or your rib bump. And that is always going to point downwards toward your rib. So this is going to be the inferior view of that. And the top will just kind of be smooth and flat. So look for this costal tuberosity. That's going to be on the bottom side where that clavicle interacts with this rib. Okay? Where bones touch together, you're trying to get these rough surfaces and bumps that grow. I guess we can just quickly delve back into complete anatomy. And I think complete anatomy gives you a really great view of how one end is flat and one end is round. Yep, so here you can see the flat end, the acromial end, and if we rotate that, the sternal end. Okay. And then here's what I was talking about right here, the tubercle. Close that for now. Oh, and then one of the other important things is you got this like S-shaped bone, right? And that's to make space because you have all these veins and arteries in your neck. So you can see the way this is going to bend out. So this is going to go up here to interact with the acromion of the scapula. And here it's going to interact with your sternum. So this is the exact view we're looking at here. And it creates this space here for those veins and arteries of the neck. You can imagine if you were to flip this around, then this would project into the neck and kind of cut off those veins and arteries. And in fact, every time you broke your clavicle, it would just pinch everything there. So that's another way to help you orient. You got to have it bowed outward. Just a superior view of the actual bones there. I don't have too much to say. Anterior view of that girdle. Okay, we'll move on to the humerus of the upper limb. This is the longest, largest bone of the upper limb. And I guess I'll just show you a few key landmarks here to help with these. Well, the head of the humerus here, that's what's going to insert into the glenoid cavity that I showed you previously on the scapula. Okay. So you're going to get that. So you obviously can tell then which way that orients the bone then, lateral versus medial. So that head is going to point medial to interact with that socket. It wouldn't point outward. Okay. What else? Deltoid tuberosity. You're going to see this little tuberosity, which remember is a bump. That'll be on the side. That is muscle attachment, and that's going to help. We'll talk about articulations more next time. But that's going to help abduct, which means lift your arms. So you can see the muscles are going to attach right here. When they contract, it's going to pull and raise those arms. I guess I should point out that deltoid tuberosity then is always going to be on the lateral side of that bone. So it wouldn't be medial because that would help adduct or bring those arms closer, but it helps lift the arms. So that's going to be on the lateral side, the deltoid tuberosity. What else do we got here? To help you orient, I guess, anterior versus posterior. the main thing I look for after, I guess looking for the head, would be this olecranon fossa. Okay. So the olecranon fossa is kind of this thumb-sized hole. And when you actually get in and work with these models, which I'll talk about at the end of this presentation, it's coming soon, but that's like a thumb. You can fit your thumb right in it and kind of articulate your thumb. And what that is, that's where the olecranon process of the ulna inserts. So when you lift and raise your arm. So that's always going to be on the back, that olecranon fossa. Okay? You can actually feel it, the ulna kind of move into that spot when you abduct and adduct your arm. Okay? So this olecranon fossa is on the back side, the posterior side. On the anterior side, there are two, you can kind of fit your index and your middle finger into them. There's two little fossa here, the radial fossa and the coronoid fossa. Remember I said there's a coracoid, coronoid, how are we going to keep them all straight? Well, coronoid, this one has an N because this is where your ulna inserts. Okay? Ulna has an N. Kind of loose, but I think it helps. Oh, what else? I guess I can give you a couple different views. Here's a good view here. This is the posterior view, and we can see the olecranon of the ulna now, and how that fits directly into the olecranon fossa. So this is the back side, again, of the humerus. And then olecranon is your ulna. So that'll occupy that space when the arm is extended or bent. If bent, will fold in there. All right, the radius and the ulna. So these are the forearm bones. These are pretty easy when you're actually holding them, and they'll be really helpful when you're looking at them with an incomplete anatomy, because the head of the radius makes a perfect circle. Okay? Hence radius. Okay? So we can see that here. Whereas the head of the ulna, not quite the case. Okay? What else? So for the ulna, now we can see the olecranon, right? See this intricate area here, fits into the olecranon fossa. I think another important thing to remember with your radii and the ulnus is just remember that your radius goes to your thumb, okay? Radius, ulna goes to your pinky, ulna to your pinky, radius to your thumb. And it's kind of cool. What you can do is if you take your arm and you kind of permit it here, you can feel that your radius is what is, you can feel your ulna doesn't move at all. When you kind of supinate your, we'll talk about these different terms next time. If you flip your hand, your ulna is going to stay put, and your radius is turning, hence that radial head. So flip your hand. So again, radius goes to your thumb, ulna to your pinky. Another way, really quick way to differentiate the sides, or which side of the bone we're looking at here, there is a ulnar notch on the radius. Okay, so the radius has a notch where the ulna kind of sits in and where the two come together. I think that's more clear in complete anatomy. Moving on to the hand. So these look tricky. A couple tricks for this. You don't need to know individual digits, but it is important to, that's too bad. Just remember that we need to remember anatomical position, but you don't need to know the different digits. So here we're taking a look at this. This is in anatomical position, so thumb is out, right? So this is your palm here. This is the anterior view. We're standing like this. Tricks for these. The phalanges are your fingers. So that PH sound, f, just think fingers. Okay. Next, there are three parts of these phalanges. Pretty simple. You have the distal, the middle, and the proximal phalanx. Some of these are in relation to something. So distal is further away, let's just say from the wrist, middle, and then proximal meaning next to. These are pretty simple. And then we have the metacarpals. So carpals are your wrist bones, and this prefix meta means after. So this just means after your wrist bones. So these are going to be right here in the palm of your hand. Okay? So those are just single bones, your metacarpals, and then what trips people up here would be your carpals or your wrist bones. But I got a trick for that, which I'll kind of show you here, how to memorize these at least. And this will really help with multiple choice, actually. So I got a little mnemonic device that you can remember these. And the way we're going to work through these is, so make sure you're in anatomical position. Make sure you know which hand you're looking at. And then we're going to read this kind of like a book from left to right. So we're going to read this top row of the bones, and then we'll move back to the left and read left to right again for this second row. So we'll start out here with this scaphoid bone, and I put a little S there for you. And the mnemonic is kind of dirty, but it's some lovers try positions they can't handle. Okay? If you want a cleaner one, you can do Sam likes to push the toy car hard. Okay? So let's work through that. So starting with the scaphoid here, we'll move to the lunate, the trichotrum, and that's kind of obscured by the pisiform, which sits directly above it. And you can feel your pisiform here. In fact, you can kind of move it around. People break this often. So we got some lovers try positions that they can't handle. So left to right, 2 rows, just like you're reading a book. Okay? Or Sam likes to push the toy car hard. So that's a trick for that one. Lower limb, really the same kind of tricks that I showed you for the upper limb are going to apply here. Make sure you know top, bottom, and then look for different, I guess, muscle attachments that help you orient which side we're looking at. I'm not going to bother taking up a lot of time with this now because I think most people don't struggle with the lower limbs. So we'll move on then to the pelvic girdle. Remember the girdles have those sockets that support limbs? Well, that's the socket we're talking about here called the acetabulum. So this is going to support your lower limbs, and it consists of 3 fused bones. So this is the os coxa, of which there are 2 of them. There are right and left, they kind of form a bowl. The 3 parts of the os coxa are the ilium, which you can feel on our own bodies maybe, the iliac crest. So if you kind of put your thumbs there, you can kind of hook into your iliac crest. That's your ilium. Then we have the ischium, which I remember because it says ish. That's basically your butt bone right here, right? And then the pubis, which pubic area. Okay, so pretty straightforward with the os coxa. As far as which way we orient here, this acetabulum, the socket for the femur, that's always going to be oriented laterally, right? Because your leg is going to insert right here at the head of that femur. Okay. So that wouldn't be located medially toward the center of your body. And then you just want to orient that pointy pubic bone forward. So that'll help you differentiate right from left. What else? Here we can see these fossa, right? So that we have the iliac fossa. So now we're looking at the inside view of this, right? We don't see the acetabulum anymore, so this would be the inside. We can kind of see this view here. So there would be another os coxa here blocking this if we're looking at it. But, this is going to be just rough surfaces in general. So we're going to have a surface here where the pubic bones come together, and you see that rough surface there where those bones touch. And then this other rough surface here, the auricular surface, is where the os coxa is going to interact with the sacrum. Sorry, blanking there. And remember I said we get rough surfaces where bone touches bone. So here it's going to touch the sacrum, here it's going to touch the other pubis. Iliac fossa, this is really rough, this shallow depression here, compared to, if I flip back to the previous slide, we have the ala. And the ala is very smooth, this area here. And if you get your hands on these actual bones, the actual human bones, it's really obvious. Ala is very smooth, whereas the iliac fossa kind of punctuated and bumpy. So let's look at these two os coxa together now, so we can see right and left. And here we have that sacrum in between. And this is that surface I was talking about that interacts with the sacrum, where we have that rough area. And this is where the pubis bones come together here. Another rough area that we saw in that previous slide. I think there's your acetabulum here. So head of femur inserts. So that's located laterally. Okay. There's different divisions of the pelvis. These are pretty easy. We have a false pelvis and a true pelvis. So when you put these two os coxa together, they create kind of a bowl, right? You can see this inner rim here. Okay. Everything above this rim we call the false pelvis. So they're showing that in that light green. The true pelvis is going to be everything below that rim. Okay. Differences between the sexes, we can see there is a much wider, larger true pelvis within females. And that's so that cranium of the baby can squeeze through there. I usually give a birth demo with a model and a stuffed hippo in class, but we don't have that luxury this year, so use your imagination. Femur, I said I wasn't going to touch on this. I'll just point out a couple real quick landmarks. We have the greater trochanter and the lesser trochanter. Trochanters are only going to be found on the femur. So if you see trochanter, we know we're talking about the upper portion of the lower limb. It's just a projection, so it's a massive projection here on the femur. And the lesser trochanter, another smaller projection, more inferior. It's a muscle attachment for gluteal and thigh muscles. So they would attach at this point here. Tibia and fibula. So tibia, if you touch your shin, that hard flat bone right in front, that is your tibia. It's the most commonly fractured long bone in the body. And actually, if you break the tibia, oftentimes, it's such a big bone, it takes such a lot of force to break it, that your fibula is going to break right along with it. So tibia, shin bone, and then associated with that, the smaller fibula. All right, and then on to the feet. Again, can be kind of tricky. Let's start with the tarsals. Okay. So tarsals starts with T. Last time in the hand we had carpals, but now we're talking about tarsals. Think T, toes, but these are going to be the bones of the ankle. Okay. So we have the bones of the ankle. Okay. And then we have the metatarsals. Remember, meta means after, so we have after the bones of the ankle. So these are the metatarsals here. And then just like the hands, we have the phalanges. Okay. Thought I had a mnemonic. I think I forgot to write it down here. Yeah, I do. This one's cleaner, don't worry. So to remember these tarsals, the mnemonic goes, the circus needs more interesting little clowns. And instead of moving left to right 2 rows this time, we're going to kind of make this S shape. So I'll fill this in as we go. Okay, so we got the talus, a lower part of your ankle bone. Okay. And then we have the calcaneus, which our heel, right? And that's a large bone. So if we're making this S shape, you can see that we're starting at the bottom of the S and then we're going to move this way. So the circus needs more interesting little clowns, finishing with the cuboid. So we make this S. Navicular, medial cuneiform, intermediate cuneiform, lateral cuneiform, and we finish with the cuboid. The circus needs more interesting little clowns. Okay. It's translating me to clouds I see on my screen, but I'm saying clowns. All right. So that's a quick run through the appendicular skeleton. And then I got some upcoming information and announcements for you as well. Okay, so next week, we don't have any new material, but I'll make myself available for review. Your practical is going to be rolled out later this week. That's what Manny just emailed us and said. So those of you that are itching to take it, I don't know how many of you that is, but also we're going to be getting the materials up for articulations. So those will be up early next week, and that's what I'll review the following week on Wednesday, September the 30th. Okay, so next week, don't need to tune in if you don't have questions, but Wednesday, September 30th, we'll have some new material, the articulations. And those will be those terms I was talking about here, like abduction, adduction, and different articulations. Right. We got a couple questions last time about New Science 110. We have finally gotten keycard access to that figured out, and we're going to create some type of online sign up if you want to use that space. So look for some information coming to you soon. The questions that I have for you guys right now are, what hours do you want to have for that space? So for those of you that don't know, it's a pretty big study room. And this is where we have all of the actual physical models. We are going to let you use the plastic models just because we can wipe those down post-handling versus the actual bone models. We don't want to ruin those by spraying them with disinfectant. So the hours that are proposed right now, Jen just kind of thought of some. She said 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., and that'll be Sunday through Thursday. And then 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. for Friday, and 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. for Saturday. Typically, what we would do would be 24/7 access with your key card, but just due to kind of the, different COVID policy that we're working through now within the different buildings, we're going to probably have to limit the hours this year. So does anyone have any other, you can type in chat, I believe, or you can just unmute yourself and ask questions about that or give me some suggestions. You can think about that for a second. The other thing we need to figure out for that room are what type of policies do we want for that dry lab space. So for that specific room, it's been determined that 6 is the max capacity. So that's not a lot, okay? But if we have that sign up, then 6 you can go in at a time. we figured we'd hand sanitize upon entry. There's hand sanitizer in there already. We're only going to have the plastic models available. And then you should wipe down the models and the table space you're at before you leave. And then we'll require masks in that space. Can anyone think of anything else that we should include that I'm just overlooking? I couldn't, but okay. Like I said, just let me know. That's what I got for today. So if you have specific complete anatomy questions, I'll hang around for a little bit. Otherwise, we may see you next week for the review, and then we'll definitely see you on September 30th for articulations. Okay. Oh, there's chat there. So someone was saying they suggest a little later in the evening. Some people have sports practice. I think that's a good idea.
I just had one quick question. So I took one of the like the review quizzes on complete anatomy.
Yeah.
And I noticed that there were a few questions regarding like structures that weren't on our list of structures, but they were on like the like study material that Manny had created. So should we, for the practical, are we?
Anatomy?
Yes, yeah, in complete anatomy. So are we going to be responsible for knowing more than what's on our list of structures for the actual practical?
No, you won't. And could you do me a favor and could you email me what that was and I can just let Manny know?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Professor Keyler, I also have a question. So on those practice exams, is it the last score that we take? Is that what's kept, or the best score?
Oh, I think it's your best score.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can also double check on that. I'm pretty sure it's your best score.
Okay.
I have a question just regarding like how like isolated the structures could be for the practicals. So if we were looking at like the bones of the foot, would it ever just show us like the navicular and have us like have to say what that
I
is?
don't think they would do that too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's more likely to be maybe like, I think the trickiest ones perhaps would be the facial bones of the skull.
Okay.
Yeah, because all those, I guess the wrist and ankle bones just are kind of all little squares. That would be tough. There's just one of them.
Perfect.
Could you go over again kind of what the structure for taking the practicals will be? So I know it'll be online, but in terms of like when specifically we would take it and things like that.
Yeah. So well, you can take it anytime that it's up. So he's going to put it up later this week. And then you kind of want to stick to your plan that you created to take that practical. But I mean, realistically, you could take all 4 in the last block if you wanted to, right? And it's just going to be multiple choice identification. I did find out you can, with these questions, you can manipulate that image and flip it around. So one of the big reasons we did it within complete anatomy. Anything else? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, so I guess just once it's available, we can go on probably when we plan to, but just whatever is best for us.
Yeah, the big thing is with this that we've been trying to prevent from happening is once you access that, so if you accidentally click it and look through a couple of slides, that's going to be a problem because that's going to store that as your one chance to take it. So just remember, do not access that until you're ready to go. And it'll be the same. It'll be the same format and structure as your quizzes, just more questions.
Is there a time limit on the practicals?
There will be a time limit. Let me check my notes. Can't remember right off the top of my head.
Also, I can't remember off the top of my head, but is there a final for lab?
No, no. You just have your 3 practicals. I can't remember what we decided. I think it was something around we were going to give you 30 seconds per question. I can double check on that too. I think I actually have it written down somewhere, but I'm just not recalling. So, and basically we want to give you, enough time to answer it, but not enough time to kind of flip through and access something you shouldn't be looking at, right? Because you kind of either know it or you don't, especially with multiple choice. Any other questions?
I have one more question. As far as like orientations and knowing different like angles and views of the bones,
Yeah.
on the list of structures, sometimes it's listed as like knowing the superior angle, inferior angle, but then on the slideshow, sometimes there's like more views that are shown. Is there like, do we just need to know kind of the views and angles that are on the list of structures, or should we be able to determine what kind of view it is, like any view? I don't know if that makes so like we should be able to determine. I'm just looking at, I think it was slide 7 with the pectoral girdle and the clavicle. We should be able to determine if it's a superior view or inferior view of the clavicle, or is that something that?
Yeah, right. That's fair game, right?
Okay.
And I showed you a couple tricks to orient yourself.
Right. Right.
That rib's going to touch on the bottom, the inferior side of the.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
How's block going for you all? Is it going okay? Yeah. I'm not teaching anything but lab this block. I teach B and C, so I'm just kind of watching Clark go through 325 right now, and it seems to be going okay. So I was just curious.
This is a pretty specific question, but there's just one structure that I was having a hard time locating, which was the semifacets and demifacets underneath the thoracic vertebrae on the list of structures to know. And
Sure.
would you want me just to email that to you, or would you be able to maybe show us that now?
Yeah, let me bust out. Have you done a searching complete anatomy yet?
Yeah, I searched it on the models, and then I was looking through like the pre-made screens on the atlas, and maybe I missed it, but I was unable to find that one.
Probably.
Michael, I couldn't find it either when I was looking too.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, that was also my question as well. That was one of them that I couldn't find either.
Okay. Can you give me those again? And Manny said just to kind of email him with ones that aren't showing up, and he can add them in. So this is really helpful for the next batch of students. But so they were the
semifacets and demifacets underneath the thoracic vertebrae.
and demifacets. Okay.